Hello, guys, and welcome to Behind Enemy Lines. As you know, this is a segment where we get someone, a journalist or someone involved in the club that Newport are playing next. In this case, it's Grimsby Town. And as you can see, we have James Findlater, who's a Grimsby Town writer for Grimsby Live. James, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, thanks yourself.
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Looking forward to Saturday. Obviously, Newport have Josh Sheehan back, which is a major boost for us. But we do have Liam Shepherd and Josh Laverty out through suspension. From a Grimsby perspective, any injury updates or suspensions ahead of the game?
So it's pretty much as you were in terms of the last couple of games, I think. So Felipe Moraes is out injured at the moment. They're thinking he might come back next week, but obviously this weekend will be too soon for him. Cal Bennett's out. He's probably going to be out for another few weeks. Apart from that, it's pretty much full strength squad. Obviously, a lot of new signings on deadline day, so all four of them will be kind of vying to get a first start. And obviously, I mean, among them, it's Linnell John Lewis, who's obviously a former Newport player. He'll be open to get his first start back at the club. And apart from that, Joe Bunny, Joe Adams, and Jake Eastwood, the goalkeeper, they'll all be hoping to get new starts. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the signings there. What difference do you think they'll make to Grimsby? You know, looking forward to the future and ahead of the game. Will they be available for the game?
The hope is they'll all be fit and ready to go on Saturday. I spoke to Paul Hirsch yesterday. He said they're all ready to go for him. I mean, since the start of January and since Paul Hirsch took over, it's been pretty clear that the club need new signings. I mean, you only have to look at the table to know how badly things are going for Town this season. So it was clear that the squad needed a bit of an overhaul. It needed fresh faces, and it just needed a bit of impetus, really, and just something pumping back into the team, just try and get things going again. I mean, it's been pretty dire recently, but I mean, the last couple of games, obviously there have been defeats, but the last game especially against Stephen, there were a few more bright notes. You could see a few of the new faces, the likes of Idris El Mazouni and Jay Matete specifically. He has made big impacts since coming in. So you can see they are making an impact, and Stephen Payne got a goal after coming off the bench. So hopefully he can be a bit of a driving force, because God knows Town have needed goals all the way through the season. So hopefully, there's a bit there to kind of pin hopes on, and hopefully they can make an impact and hopefully get Town out of the relegation zone.
Yeah, you mentioned they're obviously 23rd in the league at the moment. I'm guessing that's not something you expected at the start of the season, was it?
No, I think especially after the way things went last season when Ian Holloway took charge. I mean, it looked like he had things going well for him. After coming in, I mean, things had been going quite badly before he came in last season. He obviously took charge, got things going again, started climbing up the table. There was maybe a slight hope that it could push for the playoffs, I think, towards the end of what turned out to be the end of the season. It became clear that it wasn't going to happen, and it was maybe just a case of seeing how far up they could finish. I think looking at the results they got and the teams they were beating, I think there was a feeling that they could have pushed at least into the top half. And then obviously season got halted, so we'll never really know how that could have ended. But after that, it was such a strange summer, really, and really strange signings made. I suppose we'll never really know why some of them were made. I think it was kind of talk of maybe a bit of penny pinch and that sort of thing, and maybe Ian Holloway just think he could develop players a bit more than it seemed necessary, and maybe pinning his hopes on players who clearly just weren't ready. So that's the club have paid big time for that, really. And I don't think anyone really expected it to be as bad as it has been. I think there's always been a concern about where the goals are going to come from. That's been the case for a number of years, really. It's never really been addressed. Hopefully, now it has been a bit more. So yeah, it's certainly where find themselves in terms of the relegation zone might be a bit of a surprise. I wouldn't say it's too big a surprise. I think a lot of town fans were a bit concerned going into the season, especially considering, I mean, they only had one pre-season game going into the season, which just is never going to work. So from that perspective, I think, yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but there's not too much. It's not too much of a shock at the moment for the town fans.
Yeah, I think that just proves like how big especially in League Two, how big like recruitment is. I mean, for the start of the season, you had Scott Twine and like the likes of Scott Twine and Brandon Cooper. I mean, they're not there anymore, and we've had a recent dip in form, and we haven't won in 9 games.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I think back to the game at Blundell Park, and Scott Twine virtually ran things that game, and what was a massive difference in Newport getting out. I mean, I say massive difference. I think Newport, I mean, once they went to it a little bit, it was pretty much cruise control for it. So I don't think they needed to really get out of, say, second gear in that game. But players like that do make a huge difference, and hopefully some of these new signings for town can make a bit of a difference.
Yeah, who do you think for Grimsby in this game could potentially decide the match or change the game?
It's a tough one. I mean, obviously, looking at the team, I think Paul Hurst will probably make a few changes, obviously with the new signings, and I think he's eager to get a lot of them in as early as possible. Obviously, Jamie Tete, I've mentioned him already. He's had a big impact in a couple of games he's played. I mean, really wasn't anyone to come out of the derby against Scunthorpe with any kind of credit, but he was probably the only one, really. He looked like he wants to be there, basically. Looked, as Paul Hurst said, he looked like he wants to be a footballer, whereas the rest of them perhaps didn't look like that. And he followed that up against Stevenage as well. Apart from him, I mean, obviously, Stephen Payne. Paul Hurst, I think, is, I wouldn't say maybe pinning his hopes on him, but I think he's relying on him big time to hopefully get the goals for him and do a job similar to what he did for him at Shrewsbury when he went there, obviously with Shrewsbury in quite a similar position as well. So hopefully those two might make a bit of an impact. You're looking as well at Idris El Mazouni. He's certainly got a lot of talent, and looking at him in action for Cambridge, you can see that there is the potential there to be a bit of a match winner, and maybe come up with a bit of magic just to make a difference, and hopefully he might have a bit of a say.
And I'll test your knowledge a little bit here now. If you had to take one player from Newport, who'd you take?
There's no questions. Padraig Hammond. I mean, I think
a lot of people have said that.
Yes, I think virtually every town fan. In fact, I don't even know any town fan who would say any difference. I mean, apart from him, obviously, Josh Sheehan is obviously a big player. But yeah, Podge by an absolute country mile. And I think, obviously, we had the sort of half season in League Two with Omar Bogle, where he got a good few goals, but really no one's ever replaced Podge at town. He got 30 goals in season in the conference. Should have been offered a better deal than he was offered at the time, and you can't really blame him for wanting to move on. So I think really it was a bit of a travesty that he was allowed to leave when he did, and really town at least should have kept hold of him for a good couple of seasons after that.
Yeah, he has been a really big player for Newport recently. In the past seasons, all you got to do is look at his FA Cup run. Really, so his goals in the FA Cup. He's been a really good player for us. And obviously, recently, in the past hour, as we're recording this. There's been an update of the change of control at Grimsby. What does
Hmm.
that mean for the club?
Basically, it means, well, we know that things are kind of moving along quite nicely. By the looks of it, it looks like the takeover should happen fairly soon. It should. You don't want to put the time on it because anything could happen, but it should hopefully happen within maybe this month. It's basically just relying on the EFL giving the go ahead. Really, it's. I mean, Town fans have been crying out for it for years. Really, there's been this feeling that the club have basically just sort of stagnated in the league after coming up from the conference. Really, I mean, they've I think everyone kind of feels like they should have kicked on. And now, obviously, Newport made their way up from the conference. I know they obviously had a tricky season when it looked like they were going to go down. They managed to fight that. And since then, they have pushed on. And now you look at them now and you're thinking, well, they're one of the favourites to go up into League One. So a lot of Town fans kind of feel the same way, that they should at least have been, pushing for those top spots, especially considering over the years they have been, I mean, in mid-2000s they were a championship club. So there's a lot of fans who feel like they're a lot lower than they should be. They feel like they should be pushing up towards the top end of the table, and I think there's been a feeling that the chairman, the current owners, John Fenty, hasn't given the backing that managers have required, especially Paul Hurst, who left first time around because he wasn't being backed. And I'm sure you've seen kind of interviews with Podge, and other players who've stated that they left because they were unhappy with what they were offered. A number of incidents like that. And then recent times we've had the whole incident with Alex May, who was a convicted fraudster, who was spotted walking into the club, and it emerged that basically the club were looking for him and he was looking to make an investment in the club. Obviously, fans far from happy with that. The one kind of advantage of that is that obviously they made the feelings known. Alex May's bid sort of got kicked out, and therefore the Tom Shoes Consortium sort of re-entered the arena after looking like they'd gone out of the picture last year. So now they're back in the frame and they're looking like the ones who are going to take over. And in all due respect, it's been long overdue. Really, it should have happened when it first emerged a couple of years ago, and it really is just about time, really.
Yeah. And looking forward to Saturday now. I mean, both teams are on the best of form, really. I think it's Newport have won in 9 games, Grimsby in 8. How do you see this game panning out?
I mean, it's such a tricky one to call just because of the amount of signings both teams have made, really, and it's almost a bit unknown. Especially, I mean, I've been reading Michael Flynn's comments over the last couple of days talking about the pitch, that sort of thing, and talking about how that's kind of affected his team, and so
the Dragons are playing tonight. So I mean and they're playing at home. So I mean that could even mess the pitch up even more for tomorrow's game.
Yeah. I mean, I've only ever been to Newport once before, but even then the pitch wasn't in the best condition. So I know it's never the best kind of quality in terms of the pitch there, but you're in for the tough game with Newport regardless. The pitch does contribute to that as well. And I think with Town, with the amount of signings they've made, obviously not a lot of them have had time to gel, not a lot of them have had time to really get to know each other properly. Defence has looked a bit shaky over the last couple of games. There's players like, Luke Hendry, who's been one of the top performers over the last few years. He's not been looking his usual self. So things like that have contributed to, last weekend, the last minute goal against Stevenage, which should never have happened, really. And they should have got a point from that. So things like that have obviously knocked the confidence. I think it's tough to say, obviously, with Newport's recent form, you'd have expected them to do better, obviously, but I think going into it, you'd sort of expect a tough game, and given the form, I think Town might think, well, let's see if we can nick a point out of this and see whether that can sort of kick things on for the season.
What's the score prediction if you had to give one?
Oh God. I'll go for a cheeky 1-1. I'm honestly not too sure, but you got to have a bit of a hope.
Yeah, I mean, well, when Newport's form, you never know. I mean, it could be like you said, a good chance for Grimsby to kick on and start their season properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As well. Well, thank you very much for coming on, James. It's been really good having you on, and really good to get an insight into Grimsby Town.